Hello, my name is Keshwani. It's Keshwani, Keshwani. We are here because we want to prepare for the math portion of the GRE. We have been solving math problems out of this book here, the official guide to the GRE, the revised general test. If you do not own this book already, purchase one immediately. You're going to need it. The work that we're going to do together, you and I, over the next 4 days, today is our day number 84. We are on page number 220, page 84. Or rather, day 84, page 220. Over the next 4 days, day 84, 85, 86, and 87, the work that we're going to do together, you will find it helpful, you will find it useful if you happen to be one of those people who happen to have trouble with percentage problems on the GRE. Even though they allow calculators these days, but that's not enough. You still have to understand how to manipulate the equations and how to set the equation up properly, and particularly if the equation is a little bit more complex, which you will see in the examples that we do over the next 3-4 days. You will see that some of the problems are such that if you do not know how to set it up properly, having a calculator is of no use. As a matter of fact, it's going to actually be detrimental to you because you'll probably end up doing something silly. You have to know what you're doing in terms of setting it up properly, in terms of knowing how to solve it, because calculator is just a tool. It's not going to scream if you do something silly. It's just going to do whatever button you press, obviously. So I'm going to start with the most fundamental concepts, and then we're going to build from there, okay? And these things that we're about to do, the table that you see here, this one and that one, particularly this one here and that one, it is something that you should know by heart. There should be nothing on this table or that table that you should have to stop and think about during the exam. It should be at your fingertips. As I said, you should know by heart. These are simple fractions, simple decimals, simple percentages. You should know their equivalent. If they give you the percentage, you should know the decimal equivalent. If they give you the decimals, you should know the fraction equivalent, and so on and so forth, of some basic fundamental percentage figures. But before we go to this thing, let's first quickly talk about this dictionary that we have. There are 4 words that you have to know how to translate from the English language, as the problem is stated in plain English language, into mathematical language. Let's start with the very first one, percent. What does the word percent mean literally? Percent means literally what it says. It says right there, it says per 100. Per 100. That's where the word century comes from. So percent literally means per 100 or out of 100. For example, if you tell me 5%, well, 5% in fraction form is just 5 out of 100. Well, of course, if you reduce it, it's 1/20th. And something basic like this, you should know by heart that 1/20th is 5%. Just like you probably know that 10% is 10 over 100. 10 over 100, which is 0.1 or 1/10. Similarly, if you say 50%, 50% means 50 over 100, and so on and so forth. So percent simply means, whenever you see percent, it means over 100. So if they say X percent, if the problem says X percent, well, how do you translate it into equation? It is simply X over 100. That's what it means. Percent means out of 100, over 100. Wherever you see the word off, what is the 20% off? Well, wherever you see off, it means times or multiply. So whatever is going to follow, you're going to multiply that quantity with whatever was said before. For example, let's do a couple of examples to make you understand the word. I know the fact that I'm not pronouncing this word properly. Don't worry about that. Just learn the concept. Okay? Nobody's going to bother you about the guy that did not know how to pronounce the word off in the YouTube video. Just understand the concept. That's all it is. Okay. For example, if someone says how much is half, let's write down English language first before we worry about the math. If someone asks you how much is half of 10, well, half of means times or multiply. Half of 10. And of course, half of 10 we know is 5. If someone asks you how much is half of half, well, half of half is just half. times half, which is 1/4. Half of half is 1/4. If you have 1/2 of a pizza in front of you, and I say, could I have half of that? And if you give me half of that half of pizza that you had in front of you, well, you're just giving me 1/4 of the pie. Half of half is 1/4. And similarly, wherever we see the word half, it just means multiply of times. What simply means is the unknown quantity, and conventional dictates that we replace it with x, but if you replace it with y, I'm not going to tell anybody. Is, are, were, these words simply means equals. So if it says is, they just told you whatever you were told before. Is means equals whatever follows. That's all. Now let's finish up this table here so that we can do the problems that we have on our hand. 1/4. What is the decimal form of 1/4? 1/4. 1/4, of course, is 0.25. In percentages, it will be 25%. 1/2. 1/2 is 0.5, which of course is 50%. These are very basic things, but some of them may give you trouble, so that's why I'm doing all of them. Okay? 0.75, what is 0.75? 0.75 is same as 75 over 100. Of course, 75 over 100 we know is 3/4. So it's 3/4, which is 75%. 1/10, I'm going to pick up speed now. 1/10 in decimal, you already know these things, these are very basic, 0.1 and 1/10. Let's talk about 20%. I need the room, so I'm going to erase all of this thing. 20% is tricky. Tricky because a lot of the times I will come across clients who do not know the fraction equivalent of it. So if they ask you what is 20% of 55, they're sitting there wasting their time. They reach for the freaking calculator. 55 times 0.2. What the hell? What does 20% mean? If you know by heart what 20% means, it's very simple. Let's see. 20% means 20 out of 100. 20 out of 100 means 1/5. If you reduce it, 0 drops out and 2 cancels out with 10 with 1/5. So if you knew by heart that 20% means 1/5, and if somebody were to ask you what is 20% of 55, well, that's very easy. 20% means 1/5. 1/5 times 55, well, that's just 11. It's 1/5 of 55. But you have to know that by heart. Otherwise, you're going to end up wasting a lot of time. And every second that you spend extra is a second less you have for the other stuff. Time is the most precious commodity in the exam. Of course, other than your knowledge. Well, actually, time is the most precious commodity. I stand by that. You can know all the knowledge in the world that you may have. You can know a lot. Many a times I get clients where they know a lot of math. They are engineers. They know a lot of math, and they're sitting there solving every single thing in a geeky, nerdy way. It takes ever and ever for them to solve the equation and set up the equation and so forth. No, you got to find the quicker way. You got to find the efficient way. Doing the problem right is only half the battle. Doing it in a timely manner is another story. In an efficient manner is what I meant to say. Doing it in an efficient manner is another story. So 20% we just learned is 1/5, which is 0.2. 3/10 is just 0.3, which is 3 over 10, which is very simple. Let's talk about 0.4. 0.4. 0.4 is same as 4 over 10. 4 over 10 is 0.4, which of course is 2/5. So in terms of fifth, 0.4, you should know that it is 2/5, which is 40%. 3/5 is, if 1/5 is 0.2, 3/5 is going to be 60%. 7/10 is just 7 over 10, which is 70%. What about 80%? Let's talk about that. 80%. 80%, which means 80 out of 100. 80 out of 100, the 0 drops out. Did a banged up job of crossing out zeros, didn't I? 80 over 100, 0 drops out, is the excitement, you see. You reduce this, 8 becomes 4 and 10 becomes 5, so it is 4/5. And you should know that by heart. This is not very something complicated. This is not, if somebody tells you that you should know this by heart, they're not being demanding. This is very basic stuff, not just for the GRE. You should know that by heart for life in general. These are very basic concepts. People are so dependent these days on the calculator that they forget to use their brain. It is very sad. It is a sad state of affairs. The day the guy created the pocket calculator. Okay, so 4/5. Fraction is 4/5, which is 80%. Finally, 9/10 is just 0.9, which is 90%. Now let's talk about the thirds. Now before I go to third, I want to recapitulate what we learned about the fifth. Recapitulate what we learned about the fifth, and I'm going to quickly tell you, even though for those of you who've been watching my videos on a regular basis, you probably are tired of this thing. Every time I use the word, I tell you where to find it. I want you to learn this word properly. Recapitulate, you will find it on day number 32. Day 32. Just type in vocabulary, day 32, and you will find it. Just type in my name, Keshwani, vocabulary day 32, and learn this word, recapitulate. Where was it? Also, let me quickly recapitulate what we have learned so far about the fifth. Just the fifth, okay? Nothing else. 10th, I assume that you knew already. I'm going to put them in a box so you can see them. The fifth, you must know your fifth. There's the first one. Oh, blast it! That's a half. What the hell? I hope that you turn the volume off when I'm about to go on with these kind of outburst. Where is the fifth? There is a blasted fifth right there. 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, and 4/5. You must know your fifths. 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, and 4/5. You should know by heart. Now we're going to talk about the thirds. 1/3 and 2/3. 1/3, of course, almost everybody knows. 1/3 is very easy. 1/3 is just 0.33. 0.33, repeating obviously, so you put 2 dots, which means actually you don't have to put two dots, you can just put 1 dot because it's the same digits. I don't know if it matters. So decimal is 0.33. And finally, in percentages, it is 33.33%. What about 2/3? Well, 2/3 is very easy. Look, if you know your 1/3, 2/3 is very easy. 2/3 is just 2 times the amount. 2 times 1/3. If you have 2 1/3, well, what you got on your hand is 2/3. 2/3. And 33 times 2 is 66. So it's 66 going on and on forever. 0.6666. 0.666, and it's 66.66%. Finally, one last fraction that you have to know for this GRE, which comes in quite handy, is the eighth. Let's talk about the eighth. Well, we know our 1/4. 1/4 is 0.25. 1/4 is 0.25. An eighth is a half of a quarter. If you have a quarter and if you take a half of that, you get an eighth. So if I take half of this, you see, if I take half of this, 1 times 1 is 1 and 2 times 4 is 8, I get 1/8. So if I take half of this, I have to take a half of that. What is half of 25? Well, I don't know what half of 25 is, but I know what half of 24 is. Half of 24 is 12. That's how I remember it. Half of 24 is 12, and the other half a penny that you got left, that's where you're going to get a 5. It's 12.5 pennies. An eighth of $1 is 12.5 pennies, because 12.5 pennies plus another 12.5 penny will give you a quarter. A quarter is made up of an eighth and an eighth. Eighth and an eighth is 2/8, which of course reduces to a quarter. So in decimal it is 0.125, and in percentages it is 12.5. Now we are set to start our work that we're going to do over the next 4 days. I'm not going to erase this thing. Over the next 4 days, I'm going to leave it on the blackboard. We're going to refer to it whenever we need it. and I want you to memorize it. Let's start our work. Let's start our work. I'm going to walk up there in the corner and turn the fan on because this excitement is really heating me up. I think that's the expression, I'm not sure. That's not the expression. I was trying to be witty, and I wanted to say something. I can't remember the expression. I wanted to say something with the double entendre, but I can't remember it. And if you don't know what I just said, double entendre, don't worry about it. You want to learn it? I don't know how to spell entendre, which literally means to hear or to listen. And double, of course, is how we say double. Literally, it means it has two meanings, and usually the second meaning has a sexual connotation. Anyway, enough of that. Let's do the first problem, shall we? 55 is 25% of what? Well, there is our dictionary. I'm just going to translate it word by word. And if you translate this thing word by word, don't skip one single word. Translate one word at a time, and you will see that your equation that comes up, automatically the correct equation will emerge. You won't have to think about how to set it up, what the correct equation is. The correct equation will automatically emerge. Let's see what happens. 55 means equals. 25% means out of 100. Out of 100, per 100. Of means, this word of means times. And our what we're going to replace it with x. Voila, that's it. We're done. We just have to solve this equation for x, and we'll have our answer. Let's do it, shall we? So we need to get rid of this 100 from the bottom. Let's multiply this side by 100. Let's multiply this side by 100, and that takes care of this 100. So what that gives us is 25x equals 100 times 55. Don't worry about the fact that 100 times 55 is written on the left hand side, and I just wrote it on the right hand side because I prefer it this way. It's much easier for me to work with, for most people as a matter of fact, if you put your unknown on the left hand side. So 25 times x is 25x, and now we divide both sides by 25, and we'll have our answer. We'll have our answer. Voila, this 25 drops out. How many 25s in 100? There are 4 25s in 100. That's it, that's our answer. 4 times 55, I don't know what 4 times 55 is, but I do know what 4 times 50 is. 4 times 50 is 200. And another 4 5s will make 20. So the answer is x equals 220. 220. It says 55% is 25% of what? And the answer is 220. The question was 55 is 25% of what? Now, can you convince me in a cogent manner? Oh, that's another vocab word. Let's learn this word, shall we? This video is getting to be very long, which is okay. We're not here to solve the problem for the GRE. I want you to learn the basic fundamentals of percentage, concept of percentage, so that you don't have to ever worry about it during the exam. And that takes time, and it requires effort. I do not know why I have this uncontrollable urge every freaking time to break into a sermon, every video. I do not know. I think it's congenital. Well, there is another vocab word. We won't go there. We have to keep going. The word is cogent. Cogent. What does it mean to be cogent? Well, I'm not going to spend the time right now. If you want to learn the word, I'm going to leave it there. Watch the vocabulary, day number 7. Just type in vocabulary, day 7, and learn the word cogent. Cogent means to be persuasive. And the noun of cogent is, if one is cogent, one is said to have, if one is cogent, this is an adjective, one is said to have cogency, which is the noun. Can you explain to me in a cogent manner, in a persuasive manner, why this is the correct answer? 220? I need to hear that. Why? How do I know that 220 is the correct answer? Well, let's find out, shall we? The question was 55 is 25% of what? Well, 25% of something, 25% of something is a quarter of something. And if you were to take the quarter of this amount, what do you suppose we will get? We just found that x equals 220. If you were to take quarter of this, how many 4s in a 2? There are 0 4s in a 2. That 2 goes and I shouldn't have crossed it out because there aren't any 4s in it. That 2 goes and joins this guy, becomes 22. How many 4s in a 22? There are 5 4s in a 20. The remaining 2 goes and joins this 0, becomes 20. How many 4s in a 20? There are 4 of them. Blast it, it's not 4s. Why are we getting 4? 22. Here it is 5, here it is 4. What the hell? There are 5 4s. There are 5 4s. There are 5 4s in a 20, not 4. 4 4s will be 16. There you go, 55. 1 quarter of 20, 1 quarter of 220, 1 quarter of 220 is 55, which is what the question told us. Question says 55 is 1 quarter. 25% means 1 quarter of. So we just found out what is. We just found out that our unknown equals 220. So if we were to replace, we already know what this value is 220. And now the statement reads, 55 is a quarter of 220, right here. 55 is a quarter of 220, or quarter of 220 is 55, same thing. 55 is a quarter of 220, or quarter of 220 is 55. Let's do the next one, shall we? Let's do the next one. I have one more problem. I'm not sure if I want to go there because this is getting to be a very long video. Just give me 1 second and I'll make my decision. Let's do it. What the hell? I have it here in my notes. Otherwise I'll have to transfer everything and move everything around. It will be a nuisance. The question is 6.5 is what percent of 1300? 6.5 is what percent of 1300? You have to know how to set up the equation. Having a calculator is of no use here if you don't know what to do with this information. So let's do it. Again, I need my pencil to point at things. 6.5 is means equals. So I'm going to translate word by word. What is our unknown, which is our x? Percent means out of 100. Percent out of 100. X percent means x over 100. Of means times 1300. That's it. That's our equation. And I know for a fact that equation is correct. I don't have to think about it. Let's simplify it. I see 2 zeros here and I see 2 zeros here. So that was very easy. So what it tells us is that 13 times x, this is 6.5, remember, 6.5, 13 times x, 13 times x equals 6.5, and to find the x, we divide both sides by 13, and x would equal 6.5 divided by 13, which comes out to be a half. Half of 13 is 6.5. Half of 13 is 6.5, and how do we know that? Because half of 12 is 6. If half of 12 is 6, then half of 13 must be 6.5 or 6.5. So the answer is half. Our x is half. Now, if we were to replace x by half in this statement, it better make sense. It better make sense if we were to replace it. Here's our word part. So I'm going to replace only this part by half. That's it. It's not 0.5%. It is not 0.5%. It is not 50%. This thing doesn't have a percentage sign next to it. It's just half. The word percent is here already. Don't say 0.5%. X equals half. That's it. X does not equal 0.5%. It's just half. We were solving for x and it is half. Now let's read the sentence. This sentence better make sense. What we're claiming is that 6.5 is 0.5% of 1300. One more time, 6.5 is 0.5% of 1300. Can you convince me of that? Can you? In a persuasive manner, in a cogent manner, in a convincing manner? Well, let's do it here. Where should we do it? We can do it right here. It is 1300. The amount that we were dealing with was 1300. 1% of 1300, 1% of 1300 is 13. You should know that 1% of 1300 is 13. I'm trying to squeeze everything in here without erasing anything. If 1% of 1300 is 13, then 0.5% of 1300 must be half of that. What is half of 13? Voila, it is 6.5. The question was 6.5 is what percent of 1300? Had the question been 13 is what percentage of 1300? The answer would have been very simple. 13 is 1% of 1300. That's why it's called 1300s. 1% of 800 is 8. 1% of 1700 is 17. 1% of 600 is 6. You get the idea. 1% of 1300 is 13. But it's not 13. It is 6.5. 1%. 13 would have been 1%. 13 is 1%. You see, 13 is, you replace what by 1. 13 is 1% of 1300. Therefore, 13 divided by 2, which is 6.5, is 1.5%, which is what we found here, 1.5 of 1300. That's it. I am done. I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we will solve all the percentage problems that you see there, and we're going to do so without using the calculator. As I said to you before, do not reach for the calculator. It is not a smart move. People who think that being allowed to use the calculator on the exam is a very fun thing and very cool idea are mistaken, are sadly mistaken. Those people who look at calculator as crutches, it is a tool, it's not a crutch. They become dependent on it. I shouldn't have to be dependent on, I'm not dependent on my hammer. It's in the garage, but I don't run for it every time I have to do something. I use it when I find it sufficient. A lot of the times it's just efficient just to not use the tool, just do it by hand. That wasn't a good analogy, but you get the idea. Just because I happen to own just because I happen to be a proud owner of a hammer, I don't go around banging things around. I don't go banging things around. That'll be silly. Just because you have a calculator right there on the screen does not mean that you have to reach for the freaking thing every 10 seconds, every 30 seconds. We're going to do it by hand, okay? I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll do the problems problem number 9 that you see on page number 220. And then we'll spend 2 more days doing some other fun stuff with the percentage problem before we move on to something else. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.